And ready, Gordon? And action! Welcome to Series 4, Episode 3 of this Whisky podcast called...
Whisky Unscripted!
It's so unscripted, we didn't even know that was going to be part of... Gordon Dundas, how are you?
Well, I'm very well. I was at Glengoyne yesterday. I've been out and about. We've got the Whisky show coming up as well. So lots of things happening, and it maybe even might get to the United States at some point.
Mr. Biden has said we may be welcome.
Absolutely. I've got my double vax my double vax certificate sitting right beside me. We're all good to go. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's great to again hear things moving in the right direction, and all good, busy as ever, as you are. We're all busy. Yep. And that's just for you've never listened to the podcast before. We are in the ambassadorial wing of the whisky industry, and that I like that dormant. Wing. The ambassadorial East Wing. That has been dormant for a while, but now you've just mentioned tantalisingly about the Whisky Live show in London. The Whisky Show, yes. So this is the Whisky Show. Well, this feeds into a bit of latest news that we've got, so I can combine a couple of things together. Right, okay. The Whisky Show in London is probably the UK's premier whisky show. 3-day event, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Old Billingsgate Market, I think it is, in not East London, but pretty much the city of London, just near Tower Bridge. And it's great show, but obviously last year was all online. So this year it's a live show with all the sort of, protocols in place, and it's great to see it back. Now, this show is run by the Whisky Exchange, which is a huge international retailer, UK retailer. I mean, a great story started by a couple of brothers, Sikander and his brother, from a small shop in in London, and developed in probably 25 years, something like that, into a huge global influence in the whiskey industry and retailer and everything. And it's a fabulous story, and they've just sold it to Pernod Ricard, which is quite an interesting sort of deal, I think, because it's always been a retailer that deals with so many brands, and now it's owned by a particular brand, or brand owner. We always have you to look at the news, and you've segued lovely into that whisky show and that really is. We're now recording sort of almost the last week in September 2021, and there's nothing else in the news apart from we'll talk about Camp Do cigar malt, but that is the big story. And I've read groundbreaking, a world first, except, I mean, a lot of people, a lot of journalists, very excited by it. Gordon, could you put into context why it's such a big deal, why it's groundbreaking, and why it is a world first? Well, Pernod Ricard, I think, are the second largest brand owner. I don't know how many distilleries they've got in Scotland, but they've got quite a few. The big one being Glenlivet. They've got Glenlivet. They own Chivas as the brand. They have, they've got quite a lot of other distilleries. One very near Tamdhu as well. That's I've completely forgotten its name. Unscripted. It's the one that sits on the site of Imperial, and it's Dalmunnoch. Dalmunnoch is a Pernod Ricard, correct? Thank you very much. Dalmunnoch. Tormore, which when you drive into Speyside is the one with the beautiful hedges and everything. The Topuri, I think it is. Beautiful distillery, and then there's a whole load of other distilleries. Scapa, for example, on Orkney, which is probably the very unfamous sort of cousin of Highland Park. But the one thing and they've got distilleries all over Scotland, but they don't actually have one on Islay. So I don't know what that's about, but, certainly a big producer. And so, if you think about the Whisky Exchange, an international business that deals with all the brands from Diageo to the smallest producers in Scotland, being owned by Pernod Ricard will change that dynamic completely. It's the first time a producer's bought a retailer of that size. I think so. Yeah, I think that's pretty much. I've been looking at all the news reports. Yeah, I think that's probably fair. So look, it's a big thing. It's a big move for Pernod Ricard. Apparently, it's all about their e-com side of things, and the way they get to consumers as well around the world. So yeah, look, really, really interesting. And the other thing, of course, Pernod Ricard owns a lot of their distribution around the world. So they distribute themselves, for want of a better phrase. So in the UK, Pernod Ricard UK distributes Pernod Ricard whiskies and products. So their direct-to-consumer element is important to them around the world as well, because they're effectively feeding into their own network, as it were. So it's a very interesting
big
acquisition, I think,
yes,
would be the word for Pernod Ricard. So.
And my next question, just before we leave this topic, is there going to be more of this? Is this the start of producers going after retailers and under one roof?
Well, I think the point is, if we look at a lot of what this pandemic has shown, is a few things. The way people buy whiskey has changed a little bit because of this, and it may move back, but it has changed a little bit. That's probably a little bit behind this. I think the other thing is that, people want to buy whiskey from, a trusted source. So that could be your fantastic specialist retailers who we deal with around the UK, who have knowledge and ability to guide you in a particular way to a particular whiskey. I'm talking about a customer-facing element here. And then you have other types of retail like Amazon and things, which is much more price-based, and supermarkets is the the point is, I think from a single malt perspective, the trusted source is what people are looking for, particularly when you're spending a little bit more money. And I think from certainly a Glengoyne perspective and Tamdhu, for example, that's very much our outlet, is really saying to people, go to your specialist retailer, go to your master of malt or your whiskey exchange. Now that they're owned by Pernod Ricard, we'll see how that changes. But it's a very interesting, and is it a good thing? I don't actually know. I don't know if it's a good thing. I'm not very sure at the moment. But
when I read the story, Gordon, it was like these stories of Netflix buying the cinema chains or Disney buying Odeon. Yeah. It's the same. Yeah. The producers trying to get hold of the distribution networks, and that still might happen. And is that a good thing? I don't know either. But that's what, when I was reading it, that's what it sprung to my thought.
Yeah, when you're a big producer of whiskey, you generally have a lot of whiskey that you want to get out to market. If you can improve those distribution areas, improve that route to consumer, which is what this is about, then that's good. And if you've got the money to burn, great.
That's a big story, Gordon. We've got other stories to get onto. But before we even do that, what are you drinking? Have you got anything to hand?
Well, I do actually have something to hand. And we can come on to this. I mean, it's all been scripted, but it really hasn't. I had a little sample of the cigar malt, which we launched not last week, and I just thought I'd have a little sample of that cigar malt, which I'm currently having a little nose of, which is just fabulous.
My second question is, did you bring any down?
I did, yes. I've got a little sample for you. Don't you worry. I'm always looking after you. I'll make sure I get a sample to you. I've got a little sample here.
We'll go on to that story in just a second, Gordon, because we do talk more about the cigar malt, because that's another. When I was looking over my news, that popped up in the news feed. Tamdhu releases cigar malt, but I was given by a very nice friend of mine, Glenfarclas 25.
Oh, very nice.
I'm pouring it right now, and the first thing that I'm noticing, Gordon, compared to, say, the Glengoyne 25, is how, quite light in colour it is. Not a bad thing, but it's much lighter in colour, which...
that I don't know the cask makeup of Glengoyne Glenfarclas, 25, but I'm sure there's a bit of refill in there. I don't know if there's, probably refill, I don't know, American and European oak, I'm not sure, but and I haven't tasted it for about 5 years, but it's a really good whiskey, I believe.
Oh, it's a lovely whiskey. Now, I've mentioned it before, Glenfarclas, again, family owned, up in Speyside, Valley of the Green Grass, I believe. This is 43% ABV, and it's where I started the dramathon from. And it was a marathon that goes round Speyside. I only did the half marathon, but you get inside to see the lovely wood panelling. If you ever get a chance to go up to Speyside.
Oh, it's lovely.
Lovely wood panelling from the a ship, the Empress of India or something, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And I managed to persuade the barman to give me a small dram. You could see the fear in my eyes. And he says, no, I'm not allowed to. And I said, please, I'm about to run a half marathon. I come from Ian Anyway, he gave me a small dram. So I've got lots of lovely memories of Glenfarclas, and the 25 is lovely vanillas and lovely sweet floral notes there. Lovely, absolutely delicious.
Oh no, absolutely, I'm sure. And I think when you go to Glenfarclas, it's a they're great people, fabulous family-run business, and actually we have interlinked businesses together as well. But it'll be interesting. I've not been up that way. It's not far from Tamdhu, but obviously water supply from Ben Rinnes.
Yes,
there's not been a lot of rain up there, so I'm wondering how their water supply is getting on. Anybody knows? Let us know. But I hope they're doing well. And I came across cheers to the Grant family.
Oh, cheers to the Grant family. I came across a lovely bit of audio from the father of the current chairman, old Mr. Grant. I think it must have been from the 70s, talking about the railways at Speyside and how the guys in the old days would, on the railway line, the workers would drill into a cask of barrels that were heading south and fill a hot water bottle, put the water bottle back on, bung the hole up again, and then chuck the water bottle out the trains. It's a wonderful story from Mr. Grant here, talking about the old smuggling days.
Fabulous. So, and the other great thing, I think everybody pretty much lives on site who works there. So, all these distilleries, as we do at Tamdhu, have cottages and houses, and great people up there. So yeah, I'd love to go and see them. Great.
Gordon, we interrupted the cigar malt story with the drams, but just could you tee up, because I've managed to get some audio from the night, could you tee up what the evening was about for those that hadn't gone to Tamdhu and enjoyed the Facebook Live, which was a sensational evening last week?
Well, it was fabulous. And we firstly, for those who are slightly familiar with Tamdhu, we don't have a visitor centre. Our sort of entertainment area was always in the warehouses, and still is. It's the best place to go and have a dram. But we've now got the customs house on the way into the distillery, which we've invested in terms of getting that as a nice space to do events. So we decided we would sit and do this launch event, which included Sandy, of course, myself. We had Neil and Joel, who are whiskey experts who've been on, been in and around the industry for 10 or 15 years. And we had Jimmy McGee from Hunters and Franco, who's a very big Cuban cigar business, very family-run business, similar to us in London. So we basically, the 5 of us sat around, talked about whiskey, talked about the similarities of cigar and whiskey, and then tasted the cigar malt, and then we had the cigar outside, and it was fabulous.
Fabulous. And this is unlike Whiskey Unscripted. I'm going to attempt this. And here, he says, teeing up, is a small clip of you all talking. Let's see if this works, Gordon. Fingers crossed.
Practice. Lots of fun, yeah. Keep on drinking whiskey.
I think actually what happens is people within the factory, I don't think it's like one person has to smoke 20 cigars a day. I think you have different people within the factory that will be trained up.
You've got a certain palate type.
Yeah,
it's like a nosing panel. It's like a nosing panel for whiskey.
Yeah. And so if the tasting panel agrees that the blend is on point for the brand, that's how the process goes from the bales of tobacco into eventually being sorted into piles of tobacco of the Ligero, Seco Velado, Capote and Capo, binder and wrapper, that will then be given to the torcedores or the cigar rollers, and they'll be given enough to make 100 cigars a day with that blend. And often the rollers aren't aware of which brand they're making, because
it's like a recipe
within those
to
factories
as well,
they're making brands for They make within these large factories. They'll be making for lots of different cigar brands, and a lot of the brands have the same sizes.
Okay,
yeah.
It's very similar to the.
Isn't it?
Even got the blending and the bottling holes and things like that.
Sandy, we were talking earlier about the 2 different main cask types that go into Tamdhu. So that's the American oak casks, refill and first fill, and then obviously the European oak. And we pulled some in the warehouse earlier. Distinctly different colours. Much darker from the European oak, much lighter from the American oak. So there you go.
Distinctly different colours, distinctly different flavours. I mean, it allows us to develop things like the 15 that Jimmy's drinking, actually. And again, we've got a master blender, John Glass, down in Broxburn, our head office, and he's doing all that hard work, mixing those in different ratios of the first fills, different ratios of the refills, and then putting that up here, and then it's me that's then doing the piece that says, yes, we're happy for that to be released as
the taster.
So I'm doing the tasting.
The catador.
Yes, I think I'll get that in my business card. It sounds a bit more glamorous, doesn't it? Yeah, more glamorous than distillery manager. But it's so, the synergy's just there, right, all the way through this whole process.
And in terms of that, so we've got this incredible...
That was really a fascinating discussion. But Gordon, an exclusive, you actually chatted to them during the day for Whisky Unscripted.
I did. So,
reporter.
well, I mean, it was a tough day. We were in the warehouses with Sandy, discovering the real important parts of Tamdhu, not the parts everybody gets to see. No, we were just opening a few casks, which was always pleasurable. And if you ever are lucky enough to get a Sandy tour of the distillery, which is not easy to do because it's not something we do tours of, so generally you can sign a cask and things like that. So it was great, and the whole thing was great, and I think just nice to get people's sort of thoughts when we were in the warehouses. So let's hear from them.
So I'm with a motley crew here in the warehouse at Tamdhu. We've got obviously Sandy McIntyre, we've got Neil, and we've got Joel, and we've got no, I know. We've got Jimmy. We've got Jimmy from Hunters and Franco. Jimmy, this is your first distillery tour, is it not?
It is. I dressed up for it.
You did. And now you whiskey tick all done.
I mean, I think I've already taken the master blender's job, the distillery manager's job, and I just need to find someone to do my job, I think.
So we're gathered here just ahead of a tasting for the cigar malt. Sandy, the cigar malt, first fill Oloroso. Great launch last week, hugely successful. We're doing a little live thing tonight. Proud of that product?
Yeah, sold out. We released 150 bottles, sold out in a week. Another Tamdhu is spectacular. Hopefully it becomes one of our stalwarts annually, perhaps a cigar malt every year.
Although not a huge cigar smoker yourself.
Not a cigar smoker at all. So it was tonight's still to come, so we'll see what happens. Who knows?
And we've got Joel and Neil. Hi guys, how are you?
How you doing? All right, very good.
Good to see you. I'm just going to go like that. This is all. I'm just doing it like this. No, it's just to get
Joel smiling.
Exactly. And how are you guys? Looking forward to tonight. You're looking forward to tonight.
I tell you, I can't wait. And this has been a real treat just to see the very difference of casks here and to see how these come together. Yeah. What a treat it's going to be with that cigar.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Well, and just not to forget, we've got Mr. Weir here, brand director for Tamdhu. Thank you. Ian, generally, you must be very happy how Tamdhu's going.
Generally, absolutely delighted. Tamdhu is ahead of schedule. It's doing fantastically well. A lot of it down, as we were saying, to this great wood, great cast, and great support by experts like yourself. So let's keep it going.
Fabulous. Well, I'm having a great time in a warehouse on a Wednesday afternoon, so back to the studio.
What that says to me, Gordon, is how you look very, dare I say, sober and together when you actually did the recording. And yet you spent the best part of an hour or 2 hours with Sandy in that warehouse with the lads.
Professionals, Gordon, professionals. It was great, great day.
Great.
And a great whiskey, sold out really quickly. But it is available around the world. But a wonderful whiskey and really, really good. All good.
Yeah. Just a epitome of sherry cask matured whiskey. Gordon.
Before we go on as well, another little bit of news. And I was up on Speyside at Rothes Glen, which is the new house that has been done up by Whisky Magazine, effectively the owners of Whisky Magazine up there who've done it up. We were there. A whole load of people were there from the whiskey industry, and it's one of these beautiful houses up in Rothes where you can rent rooms and use it as a base for events and things. Really, really nice. But I met a couple of friends up there, Paul Dempsey from Spey, met the Urquharts, met Pete Curry from loads of people. And Paul turned around to me halfway through it and he goes, what I've really missed is that din of people speaking in the background when you're at an event. And I'm like, that's a really, really good point. So well spotted, Paul, and great to see Paul and so many other people at that event. Mitch as well, who
Mitch. Kilkerran Mitch.
Sorry? No, not Kilkerran Mitch.
Oh, no.
No.
Another Mitch.
Mitch Beshart. So we met him from and he does his own podcast as well. So I think we should do a podcast together.
Get him on.
Anyway.
Right. Oh, that was great. What a lovely shindig that was up there. And that's I've been on the website. Looks utterly amazing as well. And I suppose to throw in what we've been up to, we also went along to the Johnny Walker Experience, which if you listen to this podcast, it opened up early September, and it's a multi-million-pound experience set in the west end of Princes Street, which was the old Fraser's building, which if you come from Edinburgh, and I used to have, my brother's been there for years, that was the street corner that you met your date for the night.
I thought you were going to say something else.
You got on the number 18 bus, whatever it was, going down the Lothian Road. And if you didn't like the look of your date, you ducked down and kept on the bus and kept going. So that's local knowledge. So that was the date corner. It's now Johnny Walker Experience with a wonderful...
And for those who are on YouTube watching Whisky Unscripted's little video ditties that we put on YouTube, you'll have noticed that even a couple of weeks, maybe about a month ago, Gordon and I were just wondering when somebody was going to open something like that, weren't we?
Yes, you have to. Yeah.
So, no, really, really good. I think what's great about it, and this is really important to say, it's a great brand experience. You're not going to come away from there going, I know everything about whiskey. That's the key point. But you're going to have a great day. You're going to drink great drinks, and you know, if you want to get a little bit more of that whiskey into the whiskey knowledge per se, the Scotch Whisky Experience is fabulous, and we had Julian Coe on the show, and you could do both of them in one day, and you'd have a great overall experience, and then go and have a dram in Ishkebe, for example. So there's a whole myriad of options, but a lot of people, I think they're two very distinctively different experiences, and the Scotch Whisky Experience does a really good job in terms of knowledge and flavors and pan industry, and Johnny Walker does a very good experience about, funny enough, Johnny Walker. So there we go. And
it's wonderful, but what it said to me, Gordon, is that's a multi-million-pound investment into what you might call immersiveness, experientiality. Is that the right words? And being an experiential ambassador, it really interests me. I see Glenlivet have just finished a massive refurb of their distillery. Cardew the same, and it just seems to be a trend in the industry. So that got me thinking, Gordon. I thought, who could we speak to that could talk about this new trend? Because you've spotted it. I mean, it's always been there, but it's really now been invested heavily into. Would that be fair?
Yeah. Oh, hugely. And look, we're all about experience, particularly after the last 18 months. We've all been sat at home and not been experiencing things. And I think there's a real shift in the world at the moment in terms of, probably 10, 15 years ago, people were more materialistic. They were like, I want to have a new car. I want to have the best phone. I think people have had enough of that now. They're a bit like, my car gets me from A to B. My phone works and I'm fine. I want to go and have a great experience, whether that's whiskey, whether that's a holiday, whatever it may be. And I generally think that that's only going to be further enhanced by what we've all been through.
Well, I think it's a great jumping off point to speak to Jason Milne, who's the creative director of Contagious, who this is their world. And he is at cutting edge, working at Macallan right now. Listen, let's go and speak to Jason to get more into this.
Yeah.
Let's see if he's there.
I'm
hoping if I hold my aerial on top of the roof, we might be able to tune in and get Jason Milne, the creative director of Contagious. Jason, how are you?
I'm not bad, Gordon. How are you? Good to be here. Thanks for the invite.
And have you met Gordon Dundas before?
I've met you both in person and now in the virtual world as well. So yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on, Jason. And just for those who don't know, can you just give us a quick summary of what you do and what Contagious do?
Well, we are experts in design for the drinks industry. So we will cover anything from brand strategy through to brand communications, packaging, digital, environments, retail design, experience design, right the way through from top to bottom. And we do it, about 90% of our work is in drinks and about 25% of our work is in the States now. So we're kind of all over the world doing that sort of stuff. We're based in Edinburgh. Most of us are in Edinburgh. I'm in Glasgow today, and actually one of the good things about lockdown is we've now got kind of permanent members of staff down south and kind of even Helensburgh, some of our
There's a place. I'm from Helensburgh.
Wonderful, yeah. Well, I've obviously picked
Make it a bad place, Jason. Doesn't make it a bad place.
Fabulous.
And we're just talking about the Johnny Walker experience, the Scottish whisky experience. Is it right to say that more so than ever now, this immersiveness, this desire for experientiality, is it a real trend? Are we on to something quite different from the past?
Yeah, Gordon, it definitely is, but it's not a new trend. It's a trend that's been coming for quite a long time. You know, I've spoken to you in the past, Gordon, and I started my career as a retail designer down in London. We did a lot of work for the Arcadia Group and Tesco and people like that. And we noticed, this is a little bit of a long story, stop me if I'm boring you, but then I noticed that even then, I think pre kind of experiential tours, etc. Tesco and Marks and Spencer started to do things like, hey, this fish is from here, or, you know, it's been sourced. So they started to talk about provenance, and also kind of people like Gap would also start to have organic cotton and be aligned to like AIDS Foundation and things like that. So that was kind of coming, and that's where it kind of started, where people were actually, remember the early 90s, it was just a boom of kind of big shed retail and big, you know, there was like massive Tesco's and it was amazing. But I think, and then there's kind of Topshop that kind of ruled the world, and Primark and everything all came along. All levels were kind of expanding. So people would, I think it's a bit of an antidote to that, or people started to want to know more about what the products were like, where they'd come from, and all those sorts of things. Those kind of things, those trends started about then. Then, not long after that, the kind of bigger separation occurred, which was the internet, us being able to get smartphones, to be able to buy stuff, and we're sitting on the toilet, that sort of stuff. So basically, the internet became where you go to just buy stuff. And that made that separation even more pronounced. So not only were people, if people were interested in where things came from, they would tend to think, well, I'll maybe just go to the place, you know, where I can buy it, and that would be the shop, you know, etc. You know, and we started to see retailers like Lush, you know, who would start to kind of say, you know, Lush have got a great experience, but they would talk about their product. Like I was in there not so long ago with my daughter, and they said, oh, Magdalena, come in, look at this bath ball, it goes in the water, it's a bit of an experience for her, it starts to fizz up. And then they would have a story for me that's kind of said, you know, there's no plastic in this. You know, we're the only company that doesn't have any plastic. So straight away, that's an experiential thing. There's a story for both of us. So whereas still online, you're just buying bits of rope and everything. Whereas the high street, you're starting to have more experiences. People are more interested in the provenance, and people are more, not only just provenance, but I think brands were then required to prove it, not just stick a poster on the wall.
Yeah,
and I think that's where distilleries were already doing that.
I mean, I think when you look at the DNA of whiskey, and you look at what you've just described, and you look at the history of whiskey, the provenance of the whiskey, where it comes from, how it's made, the process, you can see it, you can touch it, you can visit a distillery, then all of what you've just said about that building want from provenance and experience just feeds so correctly into that narrative of distilleries, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And there was a kind of fortuitous thing a few years back. I met up with an old consultant of ours who knows everything about retail. And I was like, well, what's the most interesting thing happening in retail? And he would say this, that, and the other. And he said, what are you up to? And he went, actually, the most interesting thing that's happening in retail is what you guys are doing. Because, you know, unbeknown to us in the kind of drinks industry, exactly what you said there, Gordon, people are already proving it. You know, you're having an experience, and you're going to the place where it's made. You've seen it 100 times. That kind of really convinces people. So that level of understanding and immersive, organic kind of understanding, kind of meeting the real people, really has made a difference. And you'll see that with the internet going in one direction, the high street, and including distilleries in the high street, although some of them are quite remote high streets, you know, that's going to be demanded more and more. In the town centre now, there's going to be more and more space in there. And that is really where people now demand to have an experience of a sort, and that really helps with every brand.
Yeah.
For the drinks industry and for distilleries in particular, how could you pull that down and describe it to the listeners? What immersiveness, and I've talked about Johnny Walker and talked about Scottish whisky, but what tangibly can you do to give people these experiences? Well, what have you personally done?
I can go into that. I think my analogy always is with this kind of complicated retail stroke brand talk is to simplify it, if I went round to any of the Gordons' houses and I got some whiskey and they just said, there's your whiskey, and they just left you in the kitchen and you had a whiskey and that was fine. I'd imagine it'd be a brilliant whiskey. But if you gave me a bit of chat about it, we kind of had a bit of humour, you introduced me to it, you kind of gave me something I would have along with it. Those things automatically become experiences that you don't get just by having a whiskey there. So if you expand that out and out and out, what everybody in the industry has been thinking is, what else can we do? So take the Johnnie Walker experience. That's kind of at one extreme end of it. It's in a city centre, it's in a tourist city, and they want a mass market of people to go in there and really, really enjoy it. And I really, really enjoyed it. And I came out and I felt very positive about Johnnie Walker. And I really did like the experience. But to my mind, that's the sort of thing where it could have been Nike trainers, really. It could have been another brand, it could have been another consumer brand. So that's where you're kind of at an age where it is very much retail. Whereas at the other end, I suppose you have a distillery like the Balvenie, which we didn't do, and I'm not sure we ever would, because it's almost perfect. They're very lucky in themselves because they've got every stage of the process. They've got a cooperage there. They've got a warehouse. They've got the seeping of the grains and everything. They've also got a tour guide that's got incredible industry experience as well. So it's kind of, I see those two as being kind of at the opposite ends, really. The Balvenie is an 100% genuine experience, untouched by designers' hands. And you're getting everything there. So in between, there's a whole bunch of other experiences, I suppose, where people really are kind of craving something. So at Glengoyne, for example, we've done about 8 projects there, and about 10 years ago we did a self-fill, and there weren't many of them around. But I would say that is almost like the perfect balance of experience and commerce. So as you know, self-fill, you can charge a little bit extra if you've got a customer in there, and as soon as you say, you only get this here, their eyes light up and they go straight for it. They see the whiskey going in, they get a bit of whiskey in their hands, etc. That in itself is a kind of classic whiskey experience. You'll see there's one at Johnnie Walker, there's one at Balvenie as well.
There's most distilleries of it now, I think. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I mean, absolutely, it's a great example of that. And I know you've also, and you're helping us with Rosebank as well, which is a very different to Glengoyne, very different to Johnnie Walker. It's a legend being reborn, and it's amazing how I've seen some of the concepts, but that's something that, again, that experience will be very different for people.
Very different. I mean, Glengoyne has got fantastic depth and range of product, whereas Rosebank has got great product from 1993 and before. And that how do you want to talk about in terms of how does that relate to the new Rosebank, which doesn't exist yet? So that becomes a much more complicated story, and you have to be a little bit cleverer in terms of how you tell that story and make that experience. I mean, there's an old building and a new building, and so there's an old whiskey and a new whiskey. So there's been a lot of parallels drawn there.
Yeah.
And then you're focused then, because Rosebank, isn't, there's going to be a beautiful warehouse there, but that's the maturation point of Rosebank isn't necessarily the most important thing. It's talked about being kissed by the cask, I think is great. So it's actually the kind of it's the distillation process that's most important there. So we're just really careful with these brands to make sure that we concentrate on the right bit. So in terms, it's the kind of worm tubs versus the stills for Rosebank, and how those kind of light flavors and dark flavors interplay. Yeah. So we talk about that throughout that whole experience. We make sure the customer knows a bit about that. Now, to that what I'm talking about is actually quite a complicated thing to get across. And it's quite advanced, if you like, in terms of whiskey circles. So it's like, how do you tell people those things? So I suppose we often talk about, you would tell people that sort of message 3 times in 3 different ways. Yeah. And then they probably understand it at that point, or at least 90% of them probably do. And that allows you just to have a different conversation.
The rule of three. Yeah.
Also allows you to, and triple distilled as well. So, and also allows you to then leave that place and have something to share. That is, to share with somebody else. I learned that, and I learned it at Rosebank, and nobody else is like that. So that, in essence, if you're creating an experience, it really helps people remember it more. Back to the analogy of coming round to the Gordon's house, if we have a lovely whiskey and you've given me some chocolate with it, and I don't know, we played a game of Twister afterwards. Then there's a great story there for me to go and say, well, I loved that experience at Gordon's house, and the whiskey, that was amazing, and it just helps people remember, helps people be able to share things.
You told me you would never tell people about your chocolate Twister nights, but there you go, you've blotted it out.
I never realised you just don't look like the flexible type, but you know.
Jason, we've had, I think Cardew have brought out a new visitor centre, Glenlivet, which I think you've seen already. I've brought out one within the last couple of months. I'm going to Macallan this week. I believe you're doing some work in Macallan. So yeah, could you give us a little chat about what you've seen up in Speyside and some of the new stuff?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Macallan, we're helping them out with quite a few things there. We've just finished redesigning the retail, so it kind of feels aligned to their brand, as you know, kind of a real premium brand. Yeah. And then how you interact at Macallan, they have an incredible sort of high-tech warehouse there. We've created a kind of little bar in there so that you can go in and you can pause and really tell a story in there, and every single element that you touch should align with that brand. And kind of multiple other things are happening at that distillery as well. So, but I think also like Glenlivet, you're going to go to Glenlivet. They've got a beautiful new. I was just in the reception the other day. It's kind of the very kind of high spec. It was the same contractors we used for Macallan actually that built that. So that's completely reshaped. And there's 3 self-fills in the middle of there, quite an extensive retail area. But then as you go through, there's more of a kind of interactive point.
Yeah, a field of barley inside.
Oh, yes. Yeah. But interestingly, we're also working at Glenturret just now, and that's Scotland's oldest working distillery. And as you probably know, they're now co-owned by Lalique, the kind of super premium crystal. And what they've done is they've created an incredible, hoping to be kind of Michelin star restaurant, which we had the pleasure of eating at the other week, and that's back to that. It just an incredible dining experience, which is kind of constantly and very subtly linked back to the whiskey. One of the courses, you get sprayed with a kind of new mix spirit all over it and all that sort of stuff. And you just have a wonderful experience. All that time with the customer to kind of show how they care about super high quality, and every mouthful you kind of think this is kind of almost sponsored by Glenturret. These two brands are completely intertwined. Yeah. So that sort of thing works incredibly well. And also that, I mean, again, not too different to the Johnny Walker experience, just a different approach in a different part of the world.
And I think I would say, and I've been in this industry for 17, maybe 18 years, I would say the level of experience, or tour for want of a better word, but you know what I mean, level of experience when you go to a distillery now is so much further improved than it was even 5 to 10 years ago. And I think everybody's understanding that, people, yes, they want to sample the whiskey. Yes, they want to see how and they want the personalities and they want the people to speak to them. But the overall experience is so important. I genuinely think the Scottish whiskey industry's come on leaps and bounds in this area.
Yeah, it genuinely has. And also, it's much easier to seek influence elsewhere. As I said, quite a lot of our work is in the States just now, and we just opened Great Jones Distillery in Manhattan last month. Well, the whole discussion through that project is who's going to go to the party, and the answer was none of us, which was great.
Of course,
so
where's that in Manhattan?
It's a Great Jones. It's in Soho.
Oh, right, cool.
Great Jones Street.
I'm going to seek that out.
That's the first one in Manhattan for something like 100 years or something.
Yes. Yeah, it's the first genuine kind of bourbon being made in Manhattan.
Brilliant. That's great to hear.
And for that project, that was really interesting when you talk, because we still talk about ourselves as designers, because I think that's easy to understand. However, in Great Jones, quite a lot of the influence we had was really what you talked about there. What kind of person greets you at the door? What sort of things should they wear? Exactly. Yeah. What would the music be like when you come in? And what's the artwork like in the wall? How does that relate to the brand and the area? And what kind of experiences would these be, and what kind of things would you sell in retail at that point? and we work with music consultants. We talk to the chefs there about their menu, and we were influential in there. We were kind of guardians of the brand, if you like, and we helped them create the brand and the look and feel and the tone of voice of the brand, and made sure that run through and we worked with other designers over there who designed things. So, but actually, our learning from Scotch whisky industry, we're now bringing over to America, if you like. But also being influenced by them and bringing a bit of that back as well, so the whole thing is so much more accessible and it's demanded now. People, when they go and visit these places, do expect an experience of some sort. And as you say, Gordon, every year it's got to be better and better. You see things like Johnnie Walker, 190 million quid, and Macallan, 140 million for their distillery, architecture, these are big players now, and people know that it makes sense to do it. It's quite hard to define. I mean, you will I know with Glengoyne and with you guys, all your brands, and our first hurdle is often convincing the people who hold the purse strings that this is worth it, because how do you measure advocacy? How do you measure that kind of word of mouth? It's really hard to do.
Hugely. And that's part of my role, is advocacy for our business across whisky, advocacy, building those people who go away from Glengoyne or Rosebank and go, that was utterly fabulous. What a great experience. You need to go, and the friends turn up. And that's very simply what advocacy is. And, that's what we want to build. And Glengoyne has always had such great reviews, always been at the top of its game, but it continues and needs to evolve. And we're doing that, which is great. So, fabulous.
You talk all night, but I think it'd be quite nice to just finish on what might be the pinnacle of Jason's career. And we will be doing an Instagram live in a few weeks' time concerning the old cooperage. Could you just explain what's going on there, Jason?
Well, you've nailed it right there. Obviously, apart from this moment being the obvious.
He's welcome back.
He says all the right things. He says all the right things.
Well, to be honest, and I'm not trying to blow smoke up whatever. We've worked with Glengoyne now for 11 years. We started working with you guys roughly when my daughter was born. So we've worked on multiple projects with you. And as you've kind of said, we now work on Rosebank and Edinburgh Gin at multiple projects with them as well. So, I mean, Glengoyne, also, I love the whiskey. Glengoyne is very close to my heart and my liver. So the continued kind of project that we're doing with you. And I think when you talk about these types of experience, Gordon, you are one of them. I think the advancement of using you as an actor and a figurehead and somebody who will actually perform stories, and we're dedicating a space that's kind of built around your types of stories, I think is just as much an advancement as the Johnnie Walker experience. It's just done in a different way. I mean, my favourite part of it was the theatrical bit, which, no spoilers, but I think you'll appreciate that as well.
And for those of you who've not met Gordon Dallas, let me tell you, it's an experience.
Yeah.
I love it.
I've often said to people who are kind of starting this journey of, creating a distillery experience, what's the most important things? And I'll kind of say, well, a Wi-Fi connection, a self-fill, and if you can get somebody on board like Robert De Niro, or to kind of and that's why I thought of you, Gordon. But then I thought, maybe more Meryl Streep.
I was going to say, you're talking to me. Are you drinking with me?
And the other thing that I think's always been key from our perspective at our brands, and actually other distilleries that I've worked at as well, is that the people are very passionate. You can have all of this, but you've got to have passion coming from the person that's taking you on the tour, talking about the brand, because it feeds into that narrative as well. And, so well passioned up people, for want of a phrase, is really, really important to the overall experience, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at TripAdvisor reviews, most of the TripAdvisor 5-star, the difference between most 5-star and 4-star TripAdvisor reviews is that they will mention a person, or they will single out somebody. Now, there's only so much that we can do about that. I mean, we will write scripts, and we'll try to work with you guys to kind of get that nailed as much as possible. Creating amazing kind of staff facilities is a big deal too, because you've got to feel great at your work, all that sort of stuff. So, but the people there, and that's why I said, Wi-Fi connection and self-felt, and just a brilliant person to speak to. will take you so far down the road, you know. Right. And then all the other stuff we do are really tools to help you guys tell your story.
Fabulous.
That's absolutely brilliant. Jason, that's a brilliant, it's a absolutely wonderful conversation there. Real people enjoyed that. Jason Milne of Contagious, thank you very much for your time.
Before you go, Jason, we always normally ask, and we forgot because we were so excited that you were on, what whiskey you would normally we have a whiskey while we're doing this. If you could take your pick, it doesn't have to be an Ian McLeod whiskey, but what whiskey what's your one you reach for? You like, do you drink whiskey even?
Yeah, I think so.
yeah.
I'll give you multiple answers. One of mine is the Lafroig 15. One of the first brands I worked on was Lafroig, and at that time I was going over to the island, and I would be able to pick up the whiskey quite cheaply, and I would love a Lafroig 15. I'd buy it and we just drink it. And now you know you can't get it for love nor money. You know, it's about $300 a bottle or whatever.
I know.
And that was probably my first love. You know, is Lafroig 15.
I mean, I'm good mates with John Campbell, friend of the show. Still can't get it.
Yeah, the formerly young John Campbell.
Exactly. Anything else? Do you like the peaty ones, or
no, I wouldn't. That's probably got the most emotional connection to me because you know I'd never really been to a distillery before that, and it was so that was so visceral. You know, the smell, the seaweed, all that sort of stuff. But I will always tend to recommend Glengoyne quite a lot. I mean, I've got a great story about kind of what we do versus what you do, and I shared it with Stuart and the team. We're having this thing in the Devil's Advocate in Edinburgh. Me and my colleague kind of saying, right, you buy a whiskey. What you guess this whiskey? And we said to the barman, what's your favorite whiskey? And he said, it's the Glengoyne 21-year-old. And I was like, oh, right, that's interesting. I wonder why. And he said, well, you know, I went there, and the guy that took me on the tour, he had actually been to Spain, and he'd seen the trees, and he understood all this sort of stuff. And he was passionate about that. They have the slowest distillation in the world. They really take care of all this. And basically, he recited the script that I had been working on with you guys, collectively for the last sort of 8 to 10 years or whatever. Yeah. I was like, well, that's brilliant. And it was the easiest expenses I ever had to get signed off was there.
and there's an advocate right there. So
there you go.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fabulous. Jason, thank you very much.
Gordon, that's a fascinating discussion there. And I have, thought so often that we walk into supermarkets and there's a psychological battle being fought for the money I'm spending, and I know I'll lose it all the time. So it's amazing how these retail outfits can part you with your money just through colours, sights, sounds, and all that psychological stuff.
I think it's just, yes, ultimately great, but it's giving the person the experience that when they leave, they're very happy with the whole situation. And I think if you look at retail and you look at the successful retailers, I'm talking high street retailers, if you look at a lot of the ones that have failed recently, they haven't evolved. They haven't changed, the Debenhams of this world or the, whatever. They're the same as they were 20 years ago. And we've moved on, and we need to give people a different experience. That's where you're seeing in whiskey the use of experience, things like that. And the reason that you're seeing the way that you engage a customer through whiskey is very different to what it was 10, 15 years ago. And I think that's really, really important. But it's not just, and that's why I have this wonderful team of experiential ambassadors, which includes, of course, you, Mr. Dallas. But we have another guest.
What?
We have Mr. Kingscott. Philip, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Well, I mean, firstly, I'm fine. I'm good. Yes.
Yes,
Gordon,
very good.
Gordon's well.
Well, something in my throat, Gordon. I've just got something sticking in my throat. It's 3 letters, G-I-N-N.
Yes, Philip, can you tell everybody on Whisky Unscripted what you do?
Yes, I am the experiential ambassador, the gin experiential ambassador for Ian McLeod Distillers, but our most well-known gin is Edinburgh Gin.
It is indeed, and a class-leading gin it is. So let me just say, I do enjoy a gin and tonic, Gordon.
Hey! Good.
Okay, I'll let you
like a gin and tonic, Gordon?
I do like a gin and tonic.
I also love
highball first, but gin and tonic.
I also love a Negroni.
Yeah. Oh, love a Negroni.
It's almost my favourite drink. But I did once make a Negroni with a sherry cask Tamdu. Ooh, that's beautiful.
I have got I did a bit of research, and we'll get on to speak to Philip in a second and join in with this one, but I was on Drinks International, and they have just released their 2021 50 of the world's most successful or favourite cocktails. And they've sampled 100 barmen throughout the world and compiled a list of 50. Now, let me go to Gordon first. Gordon, what out of the 50 cocktails, do you think there's more gin cocktails or more whiskey cocktails?
Oh, I've got to go with whiskey.
Oh, sorry. I counted 11 to gin and 7 to whiskey out of the ones that were mentioned.
What about the remaining 32? What are they made with?
Rum, vodka.
Vodka.
Philip, out of those 50 world best cocktails, what do you think is number one? A gin cocktail or a whiskey cocktail?
See, I would have to say it's got to be a gin cocktail. Is it something like a gin and tonic? I don't really quite class a gin and tonic as a cocktail. I've seen it on cocktail menus.
Oh no, Philip. For the last 7 years, it's an old-fashioned whiskey. For the last 7 years, Drinks International, you can check it out on the website. So but that brings in this old argument, gin versus whiskey. Discuss. Has it always been thus, Philip? Has it always been a competition between whiskey and gin?
And before we go any further, Philip, what are you drinking?
Oh, well, as is tradition, I've got a dram.
Hey!
So,
what dram have you got?
Well, I thought if I hold it up to the camera, I'll tell you it's only 5 years old. It's been in a bourbon cask for those 5 years. I don't know, just using your eyes. Quite malty, got quite a bit of spice to it. Any guesses?
No.
No.
That could be a lot of whiskies. Well, in actual fact, I'm not drinking a whiskey. I'm drinking a gin. Hey!
Oh, he's pulled the wool over.
So he has. So I'll get you and your little dog.
There you go. Actually, I'm wrong. It's 8 years old. In a 8
years old.
Barrel.
Filliers. Very nice.
Yeah, it's a Belgian Geneva, and it is. It's gin, but it's kind of gin meets whiskey. So yeah, I thought it'd come in at a different angle and just kind of prove the fact that gin is not always what people think it is. And also,
no, it isn't.
You're kind of the thing is with whiskey, everybody's used to drinking whiskey neat, and I suppose the work of two esteemed gentlemen like yourselves is that you're trying to educate people and go, no, look, you can put it in cocktails, you can mix it with things as well. Whereas I'm kind of doing a little bit of the opposite. Everybody was already mixing it. I'm saying let's just separate it out first and let's get to grips with the spirit itself and realize how good that actually is. So, yeah.
And I suppose if you go back in history, whiskey was not always what we think of as whiskey today. Whiskey I'll get recipes from the 1520s, 1540s, mixed with herbs from your garden. And it was really ushkaba, as opposed to ushki, which was the clear stuff. So even in the early stages, there was stuff that had been mixed with other herbs, like early gins.
Well, even some of the whiskies today, Manhatten, I believe, is Gaelic for Hill of the Juniper. So there is a kind of, when we get into that early kind of more muddied history of Scotch and other distilled spirits, you could argue that actually the earliest version of the Scotch that was being made in Scotland was actually closer to gin. It probably would have had herbs and things in there. They perhaps might have even heated their stills using juniper, because juniper wood gives off really minimal smoke. And if you don't want the exciseman to see you, then you're going to use juniper wood to heat the still. And why not shove a few of the berries in there as well? Add a bit of flavour to the stuff you're distilling.
Right. So, at some point in the history, the forks diverged, but certainly there's more that brings it together in the early part of the history.
Does not look convinced.
No, I'm pulling your leg. I thoroughly am engrossed in how gin is made as well. It's certainly a very interesting product, but ultimately we know gin is much more instantaneous than whiskey by its nature.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of distilleries, modern distilleries, new distilleries produce a gin, because it helps with the income, shall we put it that way, while waiting for their maybe longer term whiskey to mature.
And on that note, as we almost get to the finale of Whisky Unscripted, Season 4, Episode 3, how would you both like to take part in the Whisky versus Gin Challenge?
Yes, yes.
Get the rounds of applause, get the special effects.
Okay.
I don't have a coin. First or second, Philip.
Can I just say something? Can I just say something, Philip? I'm not holding out a lot of hope for you with your gin on a whiskey podcast, but you never know.
Philip, you're our guest. Would you like to go first or second, my love?
I'll go second.
Second,
Oh,
okay.
second. Oh.
Gordon, just as you said, lots of whiskey distilleries are producing gin, so
Yes.
it's not like they're two different families, sometimes from the same family. Just tell me the distillery. Now, this gin is called Kirsty's Gin. They also produce a vodka called
Arbicki.
Arbicki and Angus.
You got the easy
is
one.
the correct answer. Just a wee word on the distilleries, if you may, Gordon. Arbicki, what do you know about them?
Family run business by the Sterlings. I actually met Ian Sterling at the event I was talking about earlier at Rothes Glen. All about grain to glass, so the whole process. Really nice people. Done a rye whiskey, I think, that's been quite interesting. So yeah, no, great, very good.
Absolutely, a huge, vast knowledge you've got there, Gordon. Meeting the Sterlings there. But the article I'm getting all this information is Becky Paskins from ScotchWhiskey.com. So not Googling it. So well done, Becky. Thank you very much. But she said in that article, it may have changed. They're not releasing their single malt until age 14, 18, and 21. Which will start releasing 2029. So Arbicki whiskey. Okay. Philip Kingscott in the gin corner, the EG corner. The gin is called Red Door. Sounds like one or two dodgy videos I may have watched in the past. But the gin's called Red Door. What famous Scottish distillery is releasing that gin?
Oh, I wish I'd gone first now. Oh, you know it as well, don't you, Gordon?
I do.
So we're recording this in Zoom. Most of it's going to go out on audio, but we'll put wee clips on YouTube. But I can see Gordon's hands in the air. Philip, do you want to give us a guess? I'll say that the gin still is named Peggy, after the wife of George.
Oh, that doesn't help me at all.
You have to pass it on.
I mean, I could make a wild stab in the dark and say Glenmorangie or something like that, but I'm probably very wrong.
Philip, you've got it wrong. Gordon?
That's so mean.
Gordon MacPhail, Ben Rumach.
Correct, Ben Rumach.
Wow.
George is the legendary George Urquhart, the second generation of the Urquharts, who released the Connoisseur series in 1968, called by many the father of single malt, and his wife is Peggy, and that's the gin still named after him, Gordon.
And a little bit more news, they've just released an 80-year-old whiskey, have they not, Gordon?
Yes. Talking about
I think it's the oldest proprietary bottle of whiskey ever released. And I'm not sure, I might have heard this correctly or incorrectly, but they're not pricing it yet. They're going to price it after, I think, one of them goes on auction or something like that. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But brilliant. But the oldest
distillery.
Whiskies. Yeah, nice, great people.
Lovely bit of smoke. So these quizzes are good for talking about the distillery, but Ben Rumach, unusually a smoky Speyside.
Yeah, no, very nice. Very, very, they really, really love. Small distillery, red chimney. Very nice. Fantastic.
Philip, you're going to really regret going first.
I know.
Because the third...
He's gone second. He's gone second.
I've gone second.
It's question 3. I can't actually think. You're going to regret going second because the third question is the gin is called the Botanist. Gordon Dundas.
Got all the easy ones.
No, that's just a
Bruichladdich on Isla.
Correct. Made in an old Lomond still named Ugly Betty. It was rescued from the demolished Inverleven distillery. 46 ABV. The first and at a moment only gin on Isla.
And a quick shout out to my friend Jen, who is their global brand manager.
Right.
Hello, Jen.
Yep. Bruichladdich, discuss. 30 seconds, Gordon, anything?
Fabulous. I think Bruichladdich is a great company, great business. I think Botanist is a great gin. I think Philip would agree. Yeah. Interesting initials on the bottle. If you see them on the front, just look out for that. You'll see what I mean. But great product and lovely people, as most people are in this industry.
3-0. Philip's getting less lovely because he's not enjoying this.
3-0. Oh yeah, 3-0. You're right. You got mine one.
He's got Arbiki, he got Ben Romick, he's now got Bacardi, and back to you, Philip. Gordon's Tanqueray. What distillery is Gordon's Tanqueray made at?
Oh well, that's made at Cameron Bridge Distillery.
Oh yes, it is. Oh yes, Cameron Bridge. I think it's Europe's largest distillery. I don't know if it still is. The Cameron Bridge, a massive operation.
Yeah, the whole thing is massive. Yeah, like the warehouses and everything. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
owned by Diageo, of course. And one of the footnotes is that's when they closed their offices and business in Kilmarnock, that sort of moved up to Cameron Bridge, I believe. So many people.
I can tell you a Tanqueray fact. One of the stills that they distill Tanqueray on is called Old Tom, and it's the oldest continuous working still in either the UK or the world. I think it's been distilling since the mid 18th century.
Oh, love that. So Old Tom, we had Old Peggy, and we had Ugly Betty. So yeah, people like naming their gin stills. Gordon, back to you. I've taken out a word. This is Thompson's Brothers Experimental Batch. That's the name of the gin. Thompson Brothers. There's the clue. Experimental Batch. What's the distillery?
The Thompson brothers weren't by any chance twins, were they?
Are you thinking of Tintin?
No, I'm thinking of the Thompson twins. Thompson brothers. Hold on, actually.
Yes, because I know we've talked. I think we've mentioned them previously on the.
God.
Quite recently, they've just released a 3-year-old. I believe it's just a new distillery. I'm going to give 3 seconds. This is not great podcast radio. MD listening at home.
I don't know. Nick Neen, no idea. Don't know.
Nick Neen, no. Philip Kingscott.
Are they something to do with Dornoch or something like that?
They are to do with door knockers. Dornoch, yes. It's a Dornoch distillery.
Yes.
That's 3-2. You're in distance. And it's back to you. It's back to Philip. Philip, Hendrick's. Where is Hendrick's gin distilled at? What distillery in Scotland?
Gosh, I mean, I know it's in Girvan. Is it called
That will
Girvan
do.
Distillery?
It's Girvan.
Yeah?
That will do. Don't say anymore. Girvan. It's another big, huge site. Do single malt there. They do single grain there.
Ailsa Bay for half a point.
Well done. I make that.
You're just giving yourself half points now.
I make that for each any Ailsa Bay or something fact about Girvan. They've also got. There's one that's matured at the sea, one that's matured inland.
Airstone.
That's the one.
Airstone, yeah.
I mean, you'll know the name of the owner's massive alcohol company, and it's suddenly escaped my head. But Hendrick's was really the gin that kick-started the modern gin kind of resurgence. Even though it's not a craft gin, made on quite a big scale, and it's not a London dry gin because they add cucumber and rose essence after distillation, but it is still the gin that made everybody kind of look at gin afresh. So my bedside lamps at home are Hendrick's bottles. I know that's quite sad.
And that's where people like Edinburgh Gin picked up, and that's one a huge, massive market now. Gordon, it's just the way. I've only got 7, so it's just the way it's worked out. This is the last question. It's 3 each. Good attention, get any more? Yes, quite a lot more. But that's not to say that's not a bad quiz. Gordon Dundas, the last question. Macker Gin.
Isn't it my go?
No.
Oh, no, it isn't. Oh, sorry. I'm just so keen to win.
It's Macker Gin.
Is Glasgow Distillery.
It is. It's named after the Scots Gaelic for maker. And their still is called Annie.
Oh, well, I've got another one for Philip, which if he gets, I'm happy to give it a draw.
Okay, Gordon.
All right. Caroon Gin.
Oh, I do know. They're up north, and they're a well-known distillery. Oh,
that's the best question when you know it, but you can't remember it, rather than you just don't know it.
Because they do one that's aged in a whiskey cask, and you're like, well, it's obviously one of yours.
You drive past it on the way to Speyside.
Yeah.
It's just past. It's not far past sort of Boat of Garton sort of area.
It's a wee village called Cromdale.
It's not very far past.
I'll kick myself and say it.
Yeah.
But,
Come on, no.
Does it begin with a G? No. Or a K?
There he is, struggling badly.
They usually do. Balblair is a guess.
No, that's too far north. Nearly. Balmenich.
Balmenich.
Yeah.
Hit the bar.
So I think to be fair, that's a fair victory.
I think that is, Gordon. You have taken it. The Whisky Boys have taken it, and you have hoisted the flag above the gin. But what it tells you, and us, and hopefully people listening, that how closely gin and whiskey are related with all these distilleries doing gins.
Yeah, and there's no way. There's also the other thing which people forget is to make good gin, you need to know how to distill. To make good whiskey, you need to know how to distill. You can have all the other things in the great store. If you ultimately don't know how to distill or don't know how to infuse or macerate or slowly distill, and from a whiskey perspective, you're not going to make a good spirit. So it's not as simple as a lot of people think it is. Is that not fair, Philip?
Yeah, I mean the only difference between the two spirits really is time. But the same amount of craft and skill goes into the making of them both. Yeah.
So if you've not tried it, Edinburgh gin.
Yes, brilliant. Listen, Philip, we'd love to get you back on, but we have to go away and celebrate this victory with lashings of single malt. Philip Kingscott, thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, chaps. Bye.
And indeed, thank you, Gordon. And
another episode has flown by.
You're flushed with success, yes.
Well, I'm off to go and revel in my success. Great to Philip on, and what a great episode. We've covered a lot of ground as ever.
Yep, thanks to Jason, thanks to Philip and Gordon. Amazing amount of knowledge here. I hope you all enjoyed it. And please get in touch with the Facebook page, Whisky Unscripted. It's a good way of getting in touch with us. But until then, Gordon, I'll raise my glass to you and say, well done.
Thank you very much. And I'm not got a cigar, but slander.
Cheers.